Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am Dungeon Master Bloodworth, and as you can see by the graphics, today's video I am going to be making, to some a quite incredible claim, but I stand by it, and that is that Dungeons and Dragons Basic Rules is a masterpiece in introducing new players to the hobby. So, what would make me come out and say such a thing? Because not only do I think it's genuinely true, but looking over all of the different tabletop role playing games that I have, particularly those that are meant to be introductory items, whether it be starter kits um, or sets just like this here. Uh, this is, I believe, the true pinnacle of what they're all meant to be, and yet few, if any, even match what this particular 1983 basic rules set actually does. And so I'm just going to go over the elements of it that I think make it truly stand out. And it's not just an entryway to Dungeons and Dragons. It is an entryway to tabletop role playing. And now this is all in response to I did a live stream last night, and Anthony, one of the commenters on the on the live stream, asked me. He says, if you had to choose one system, that is best to introduce players, which one would it be? And this is instantly my choice. All right. So I'm going to switch views here and talk a little bit about this here. And actually, I'm going to reach back there and get the other book. So I should have had that set up already. So this is a 2-volume set. There is the player set, the player manual, and then the Dungeon Master's rulebook. And this one clearly says, read this book first. And this book you're giving to the players as well. The players are supposed to have this book in their hand, and they're supposed to read through this before their very first session of Dungeons and Dragons. And again, this is not just a introductory to Dungeons and Dragons. It is an introductory to tabletop role playing. So what I really like about this, and I mentioned this during the live stream last night, what I think is so important is that this limits the player to thinking about just levels 1 through 3. They don't have to go beyond that. I know a lot of people will argue that the Rules Cyclopedia is the best version of Dungeons and Dragons, comparing it to all other editions out there. And that may be true to the extent that it's the best compilation of Dungeons and Dragons rules without it going into the realm of the advanced series, the advanced editions, or to the latter editions that followed it. So not D&D 3.0, 3.5, 4.0, or 5e. It's clearly kept it to what was just covered in all of the basic or BECME, so basic expert. I always get this acronym wrong in my head. It's basic expert, masters. I forgot to see companion masters, and then finally immortals, which even according to Frank Metzner is not Dungeons and Dragons. It's something completely different, but really nice to have that one in your collection as well. So what I like about this is that it allows for the player to just focus on what is happening from levels 1 to 3, and not projecting forward and looking to see, well, you know what, I have the rules encyclopedia. I could see, what am I working towards when I'm level 14? Now, this keeps the player grounded and thinking about their character just at this low entry level and without any thought about character building, let's say. It removes the metagaming that oftentimes I think plagues a system that is a very complicated system. This is a very simple system. And so that's another reason why it is such a great introduction to both the hobby and to Dungeons and Dragons specifically, because there's not a lot going on there for the player to get focused on their character sheet, and it opens them up more so to get into role playing, ROLE playing, as opposed to role playing, ROLL, and focusing on what their character can do based on class and level features and such. So, but this is still a class and level featured system, right? So this is still considered a first generation tabletop role playing game. And so I would argue against some of those who say, well, you can only get true role playing from a second gen, a skill based system, and you can't get it from a class and leveled system. I disagree with that on the grounds that if the class and leveled system is very simple and bare bones, then there's plenty of room for role playing in there. And then the player has to come to the table looking to role play. All right. Not every fighter is going to go sword and board, and even in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, not every fighter has to go sword and board. They can choose to go other other ways. I've seen fighters, and I've played fighters that would double specialize in a weapon that is not a traditional weapon for them to double specialize. I've double specialized in the sling, all right, and people will be like, "That's unheard of to double." And I was like, "You can do a lot of damage, and you can fire or darts. My gosh, darts! You get 3 attacks from non-specialization of a dart. Imagine double specializing, and then as you go up in those fighter levels, you could start throwing 9 or 12 darts. The amount of damage that you're going to dish out is really pretty significant at higher levels. So there are ways with a simple system, there are ways to include things that are more role playing focused than game mechanic focused. All right. And so that's another thing that I think makes this system really stand out because it is such a bare bones system. But that's not where the true masterpiece lies with this rule book either. Right? And now I'm going to start going into that. So I'm going to go through quite a bit of reading here. So I will try to take breaks and expand upon why I felt this portion stood out. But I'm going to read about 4 pages. And I want you to just, follow along and listen to the points that I make. And then you're obviously free to come in and comment about those specific points, or make any of your own as well. But if you are going to comment in the comments section with that, please use timestamps so that I can go back and double check and see exactly where I might have misspoken or whatnot, or at least get an idea of where you're coming from, specifically where I was talking about. I want this video not only to be a declarative, this is a masterpiece in introducing new players to the hobby, but I also want it to be somewhat of a pitch for this, as well as possibly an instructional kind of video, because I want you to see the brilliance that I see. All right, so I'm going to pause this for a second. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to pause every once in a while just to have a coughing fit. I am getting over a I'm getting over an illness, and but I still wanted to get this video out there while it's fresh because it is coming off of a comment from last night's live stream. So I will have this a little bit more paused than usual. So here we go. So I come right here to learning how to play Dungeons and Dragons games. All right, now this is the revised. This is all revised by Frank Metzner. All right, so this is the 1983 box set, and all of this here is just a layout for the player. Remember, this is the player reading this. And the player is going to do some of these things and follow these instructions as he or she goes along. So I really want you to get the idea of what's going on here. All right. So it says, start here. A dungeon is a group of rooms and corridors in which monsters and treasures can be found. And you will find them as you play the role of a character in a fantasy world. There are many kinds of monsters, but dragons are the biggest and most dangerous and have the most treasure. You can start playing this game right now without learning any rules and without anyone else to play with. Just start reading and you will discover the basics of the game in a matter of minutes. All right, so I'm going to stop here for a moment. This is very, very important. And it really is a smart way to get the player comfortable with what they're about to do. It's telling them you don't have to know the rules right now. You're going to learn them as you go. Next, during your first adventure, you will only need one of the dice in the box. The others will be used later. For now, all you need is the roundish one with the numbers 1 through 20 on it. Use the crayon to fill in the numbers and rub off extra wax with the tissue so only the numbers are colored in. This is really old school now, all right? After you do that, get a pencil and paper and you're ready to start. Read this booklet just like any book. Don't skip around. This edition has been completely revised to introduce the game to you step by step. While you are reading the next sections, you will learn many things about the game. You do not have to memorize everything as you go along. By the time you have played the solo adventure, pages 13 through 22, you will know how to play the basic game. The rest of this booklet gives other details that you will need when playing the game with others. In group games, one person is the player. One person is the dungeon master, and everyone else is a player. The dungeon master, or DM for short, runs the game while the others play the roles of their characters. The other booklet in this set, Dungeon Master's Rulebook, gives all of the information needed for running group games. What is role-playing? So this is one of the biggest questions that, at least within my circle, keeps on coming up, over and over again. Can you truly role-play in Dungeons and Dragons? What is role playing? What kind of role playing are people doing? Is it 1D, 2D, 3D, 4D role playing and such? I think that's probably more unique to the circle of individuals that I follow and listen to, and and sometimes agree with, and oftentimes don't. But it's certainly a discussion that keeps on coming up every once in a while. So, what is role playing? This is a role-playing game. That means that you will be like an actor, imagining that you are someone else and pretending to be that character. You won't need a stage though, and you won't need costumes, or scripts, you will only need to imagine. This game does not have a board because you will not need one. Besides, no board could have all the dungeons, dragons, and monsters and characters you will need. For now, while you are learning, you will play a role in your imagination. Later, when you play the game with others, you will be playing different roles and talking together as if you were the characters. It will be easy, but first you will need to get ready. So, this is very important here. Here, Frank Metzner is talking about role playing, all right? Even to the extent of making it clear that you are separating the player from the character. You are experiencing the adventure through the character's perspective. He even goes on to say that you are talking as the character. All right, so that's really, really important. And that's the difference between in character play and out of character play. So he's coming straight out and telling you, all right, this is meant to be a role playing game. You're playing a role within a group, and that is a role that has function that is sometimes unique to itself. And then you're role playing with the rest of the party members. All right, and that is done in character. What role will you play? Imagine it's another place, another time. The world is much like ours was long ago, with knights and castles and no science or technology, no electricity, no modern comforts of any kind. Imagine dragons are real, werewolves are real, monsters of all kinds live in caves and ancient ruins, and magic really works. Imagine you are a strong hero, a famous but poor fighter. Day by day, you explore the unknown, looking for monsters and treasure. The more you find, the more powerful and famous you become. All right, so this tells you basically what your motivation is. All right, and yeah, player characters are going to have different motivations for adventuring, but in this case, it's laying out, Frank is laying out that this is your motivation. Your character's basic abilities. In the game, we need some way of describing your character. The fighter you will pretend to be. We can say the fighter is strong, fairly nimble, not too smart. But we need to describe the character a little better than that. We call these descriptions abilities: strength, intelligence, and others. We measure each one with a number called an ability score. The highest score possible is 18, and the least is 3, for reasons we'll discuss later. You are a strong fighter. Your strength score is 17, nearly the highest possible. You are fairly nimble, which means that you can move swiftly. The name for this ability is dexterity. As a fighter, you don't need a high dexterity score. Your dexterity is 11, which is a little above average. A fighter often isn't very smart. Your character isn't as smart as you are, but isn't stupid either. Let's say your intelligence is 9, which is a little below average. Now make a note on your ability scores. Now make a note of your ability scores. Anywhere in the middle of the sheet of paper, write 17 strength, 11 dexterity, 9 intelligence. All right. He does not even go into the other 3 stats because they're, attributes, because they're going to come later. So again, he's really parsing this out for an introduction for the players here. So they only need to focus on those 3 right now. You also need equipment for adventuring. You are carrying a backpack and other items very similar to what you would carry when camping. Some of these items include food, water, rope, and a lantern, and so forth. For now, just assume you have everything you need to survive in the wilderness. With monsters around, you will need protection. You are wearing armor made of links of chain called chainmail and a helmet. You own a beautiful sword and a dagger tucked in one of your boots, just in case. You know how to use all of your weapons and equipment properly. If you like, you can give your fighter a name. It doesn't matter whether you are male or female. All set? Let's go. So, you have just laying out the very, very basics, and you can see already that um, he hasn't even given you your other three attribute scores yet. Because again, they will come up later, and he'll talk about them later. Your first adventure. Your hometown is just a small place with dirt roads. You set off one morning and hike to the nearby hills. There are several caves in the hills, caves where treasures can be found, guarded by monsters. You have heard that a man named Bargle may also be found in these caves. Bargle is a sort of bandit who has been stealing money, killing people, and terrorizing your town. If you can catch him, you can become a hero. As you approach the entrance, you look around. It's a nice day, and everything seems peaceful. You know that things aren't usually peaceful in caves where monsters live, and it's usually dark too. So you get out your lantern and tinderbox. Matches haven't been invented yet, so the box has flint and steel. You carefully light the wick. The flame sputters a bit, but the oil soon burns with a soft glow. With your sword ready, you step into the cave. It's dark and musty inside. A passage leads inward from the entrance, going deeper into the hill. It looks like the only way to go, so you head in that direction, watching carefully for bats and other nasty creatures. Suddenly you see a goblin. He is smaller than you are and looks like an ugly little man with gray skin. He sees you, gives a scream, waves his sword, and attacks. You dodge his blow and raise your sword to swing. If the goblin hadn't attacked right away, you might have tried talking to him. But now you have no choice. You must fight for your life. How to hit. So he breaks from the story, and now he's going to talk about the game mechanic. In the game, whenever you try to hit a monster, there is a chance that you will miss, and of course, a chance that you will hit. It is very hard for monsters to hit your fighter because of your fine chainmail armor. The goblin isn't as hard to hit because his armor is not nearly as good. To swing at a monster, you must make a hit roll. Roll a 20-sided die. If you roll an 11 or less, your character misses the goblin. If you roll a 12 or higher, you hit. This number is part of the combat rules. You will learn more about it as you continue. If you miss, the goblin tries again, but misses. You can swing again, roll again to see if you hit. If you hit the goblin, he screams and runs away, down the corridor and into the darkness. Goblins can see in the dark. You have wounded him. If you keep missing, keep rolling. The goblin is trying to hit you, but you can keep dodging the blows. Remember, if you hit the goblin, he runs away. Damage and hit points. In the game, when any creature is hit, either monster or character, damage is caused. There is a way of keeping track of damage called hit points. The number of hit points is the amount of damage that a creature can take before being killed. Hit points can be any number. The more hit points a creature has, the harder it is to kill. We often use the abbreviation for hit points as HP. Your fighter starts with 8 HP and still has all 8 since the goblin never hit you. You may have hit your armor or shield, but never got through your protection. So these attacks are still called misses. They didn't actually damage your character. Constitution, your health. Your fighter is healthy and can fight a long time without tiring. This ability is measured by another ability score called Constitution. Your Constitution is 16, well above average, but not perfect. Your Constitution affects your hit points. If you have a low score, you might only have 2 or 3 hit points. On the other hand, if you had an 18 Constitution, you might have as many as 10 hit points or more. Write your new ability score under the others on your sheet, 16 and Constitution. Near the top of the page, above the ability scores, make a note of your hit points. Hit points are 8. Now get back to your adventure. You stop for a moment to be sure you are all right, and then continue down the corridor. There is no side passages, no other way to go. Ahead, the corridor leads into a wider area, which we will call a chamber. You carefully approach the chamber, shining your lantern around to see if anything is there. A hiss comes from the corner of the room to your left. And there you see a huge rattlesnake, almost 10 feet long. Near it, on the floor, are hundreds of gold and silver coins. Talking to a snake will do no good at all, and you can't just sneak past it. Again, you must fight for this battle. You will keep track of hit points. The snake has 3 hit points. On your sheet of paper near the bottom, write snake 3, leaving some room to keep track of the snake's damage. This time, you will need to roll an 11 or higher to hit the snake. It's slower and easier to hit than the goblin was, but the snake has a better chance of hitting you than the goblin did because it's bigger and tougher. If you hit the snake, cross off 3 and write 2 next to it. You have damaged the snake. If you miss, don't do anything. The snake then bites at you and hits. At the top of your sheet, cross off the 8 after the words hit points and write 7 next to it. While playing a D&D game by yourself, you should use this method to keep track of your hit points and the hit points of the monsters you meet. Poisoned. This is a poisonous snake, which can be very dangerous. In the game, there is a way of finding out whether the poison hurt you or not. Roll the 20-sided die again. If you roll a 12 or higher, that means that you dodged before the snake could inject its poison, but you still take damage from the bite. If you roll an 11 or less, your fighter takes 2 more points of damage from the poison. Cross off 7 and write 5. You made this roll to see if you saved yourself from trouble. This roll is called a saving throw and will be used later in many other situations in the game. Your fighter swings again. Remember, if you roll an 11 or higher, you hit and can subtract 1 hit point from the snake. If you miss, you do nothing. The snake bites your fighter again. You lose 1 more hit point and must make another saving throw. Remember, if you roll a 12 or higher, you don't lose extra points. If you roll an 11 or lower, you will lose another 2 hit points from the poison. You can now swing again. If the snake still lives, it bites and misses. In this battle, the snake won't hit anymore. In the regular game, it might kill your fighter before you hit it at all. So right here, he's mentioning that, adventuring is certainly a dangerous task, especially at low levels. And the possibility of character death is a very real thing. And that's an important thing to remember here. And it's an important thing to teach new players. I'll continue. When the snake's hit points become 0, the snake is dead. If your hit points ever reach 0, you're dead. You are hurt, but there is nothing you can do about it right now. The damage your fighter has taken can be healed by a few days' rest. The dead snake is not dangerous, so you get to work, you pick up as many coins, and put them in the cloth sacks you brought with you. As you are doing this, you notice that besides the gold, there are 3 types of silvery coins. Most are silver, but others are more valuable metals called electrum and platinum. This is a rich treasure. Snakes usually don't have none. The treasure probably belonged to someone else who tried to kill the snake but failed. Sometimes treasure could be hidden. Looking carefully around the room, you find a small gem, a pearl, in one corner. It may be worth 100 gold pieces itself. After resting a bit and catching your breath, you shine the lantern around. You shine the lantern around and see another corridor leading further into the darkness. Looking back, I'm going to expand this a little bit. Looking back, the way you came, you see the light of day shining in the cave entrance in the distance. It looks tempting, but you remind yourself that you are a courageous fighter and you shouldn't run away just because of a little fighting. Remember, though, that you are hurt. If you continue on, beware. If you see another snake or something else that looks as dangerous, you should probably go back. Don't get killed. Live to fight another day. The treasure will wait. All right, this is a really, really important thing to emphasize upon the players, is that they have to be a thinking person in their character. All right, they have to do an assessment, a threat assessment. What is their current condition and should they go on? And there is, as he explains here, there's nothing wrong with deciding, hey, we're going to go back, or I'm going to go back and return later. Like I said, the treasure will most likely still remain here. But in this case, he's going to continue. You carefully start down the corridor into the unknown. Your lantern held high and sword ready. The corridor leads to another small cave. As you approach, you hear a voice and see a light. You pull the shutter closed on your lantern so you can hide better and carefully peek around the corner. I really like this because he's explaining how the lantern actually works. All right, and again, that's another masterful detail to give to the players. It helps put a new player really into the scene and immersed and to start to develop an understanding of the type of equipment they're using and how it actually works. To your right, sitting by the cave wall, is a beautiful woman wearing armor like yours. She has no sword, but has a rod with a metal ball on the end. This weapon is called a mace. A lit lantern is on the floor next to her. She seems to be meditating or praying. You decide she might not wish to be disturbed, but as you try to quietly tiptoe past, she looks up and says, "Greetings, friend. Looking for the goblin?" You might, "Oh, you are hurt. May I help you?" She watches you carefully, in case you are dangerous, but seems to want to help. You apologize for your disturbing her, but you wonder what she knows about the goblin, and most of all, how she could help you. Now, of course, Frank is speaking for the player character, and that's not something that the dungeon master can do, but this is instructional. All right. In an actual play, the player is going to do this for him or herself. All right. But for this is instructional purposes, but it is giving the new player the kind of like the guidelines of how to interact with an NPC. All right, and how it should be a conversational back and forth between the two in character. So most of all, how she could help you. But wait, she might be an enemy. Keep your sword ready. You move closer. She stands and says, "My name is Alina. I'm a cleric, an adventurer like yourself. I live in the town nearby and came here seeking monsters and treasure. Do you know about clerics?" Stop and imagine what your character would say. Back in town, she might be one of your neighbors. You are not sure, but you don't know about clerics. The goblin went that way and points toward a corridor leading out of the room. "He came through here so fast, I almost didn't see him. You hit him. Good for you. Goblins are nasty." "Since you don't know about clerics, let me explain. Clerics are trained in fighting like you, but we also cast spells. I meditate, and the knowledge of the spells enters my mind. One of the spells I can cast right now is a curing spell, and you look like you need it. Spell casting. You've heard of it, but you know nothing about it. You are still cautious, but you watch as the cleric says a few words and touches you lightly on the arm. Magically, your wounds are healed. On your sheet, cross out your hit points and write down 8, the full amount of you started with. Feel better?" she asked. "Would you care to sit and rest a bit? I'd like to tell you a few things that you will need to know later." You sit down, happy to rest, but keeping your sword handy in case of trouble. She sits down next to her lantern. "If you didn't know about clerics, then you probably don't know about magic users. They are adventurers like you and me, but they study only spells and rarely fight. They have different spells than we clerics do, and instead of meditating, they learn their spells from books. There are a few magic users living in town, but not many." If you are attacked by a bad magic user, you might be able to avoid the magic, but it's harder than avoiding poison. Spells can be helpful, but they can also be very dangerous too. By the way, that looked like a snake bite that I cured. That can be very bad because most poison is deadly. You were lucky that it didn't cause more damage. Some other creatures also have special attacks, like poison. Some can paralyze, and some can even turn you to stone by just looking at you, unless you look away in time. And dragons are the worst. They can breathe fire, acid, or other deadly things. You can never avoid all the damage from their breaths, but you can lessen it if you cover up in time. Your character has different saving throws for each of the special attacks forms. These will be explained later. Charisma. Your personality. Your fighter gets along fairly well with the cleric. She was friendly right away. This is the effect of another ability score, your charisma. Since your fighter is a likable person, your charisma score is above average, 14. Remember, 18 is the best possible. If you had a lower score, the cleric would have been very cautious and might not have offered to cure you at all. I really like this because it's using the raw score to just generate the interaction without having to do a morale check or anything like that. It's just saying you have a 14. She was predisposed to not seeing you as an enemy necessarily, and so your high charisma made it where it wasn't necessary to make rolls on morale or anything like that in order to generate this interaction. It was an automatic thing. That's good dungeon mastery, by the way. Wisdom, your common sense. A cleric is very wise. There is another ability score different from intelligence. For example, imagine that you feel wet drops on your arm. Your intelligence would tell you that it is raining. Your wisdom would tell you to get indoors to avoid catching cold. I love that comparison because it really does hammer down the difference between intelligence and wisdom in just one sentence, and it is completely or two sentences, and completely understandable. You don't need to go beyond that in understanding the difference between intelligence and wisdom. Your fighter is not very wise. Your wisdom score is an 8. The cleric has a wisdom of 17, but it is fairly weak with a strength of 9. Each type of adventurer has different specialty. Magic users, for example, have high intelligence, but often low strength. Put these two ability scores on your character sheet. Wisdom 8, Charisma 14. Sharing adventures. All right, I'm going to take a quick pause here. Okay, here we go. Sharing adventures. As your fighter talks with the cleric, you get to know each other a little better. She offers to come along to help in adventure. Although this means that the treasure should be split between you, it also means that together you can defeat more dangerous monsters and find more treasure. And two adventurers have a better chance of success than either one does alone. You decide that it would be a good idea, and together you set off down the next corridor. So I'm going to pause and interject here that here you have two characters meeting each other for the first time and not in a tavern. All right. So there are other ways to break away from that trope of all of the characters first coming together in the tavern. Not that that's a necessarily a bad thing. I mean, tropes become tropes because they're a genuinely good idea and they're kind of tried and true. But you could have player characters meet each other in different ways, and this shows you that right off the bat. So, getting back to the reading. Side by side, you quietly walk down the dark passageway. You see another corridor breaking off to the right, about 20 feet ahead, keeping your lanterns half shuttered so you can see what you are doing without attracting much attention. You move up to the corridor and peek around the corner. 4 beast-like humans in tattered clothing are standing in a group about 10 feet away, down the side corridor. But they make no noise at all, quiet as the dead. They look like they are waiting for some poor victim to come along. Before you can speak, the cleric touches your arm and points back to where you came. The two of you back up a few feet so the creatures won't hear you. They're ghouls, she whispers. If one hits you, it can paralyze you. Ghouls are undead monsters, very nasty things. Neither dead nor alive, but something horribly in between. We clerics have some power over these creatures of darkness. Follow me and wish for luck. You move forward again, but with the cleric leading the way. Peeking around the corner, you see the ghouls. Luckily, they don't seem to have heard your whispers. The cleric pulls a necklace out from under her armor, and you see there is a symbol of one of the town churches on her silver chain. She boldly steps out, holds up the symbol, and says harshly, "Begone, vile things." When she steps out, the ghouls quickly turn to attack. But now, as she thrusts the symbol out, the ghouls pause, and suddenly in a rush, they scramble away down the side corridor, into the darkness, and all in dead silence. "Don't bother to chase them," she mutters. "As I said, they can be quite dangerous, and we should continue on our way. I was lucky to turn them, and it might not work again." As you continue down the corridor together, she explains, "We call this turning undead, you see. Only clerics can do it, and sometimes it doesn't work. Ghouls are only one of many kinds of undead monsters. There are also skeletons and zombies and others much worse. If you had been alone, you could easily have been ambushed and probably slain. Let's hurry because the turning only lasts for a few minutes. There are too many of them for us to handle." You see the door head to the right. This is unusual in caves, and you approach it slowly and quietly. The corridor continues past it into the darkness. Together you examine the door. It is made of wood with heavy iron bands across it. The hinges seem to be on the inside door, on the other side. The large keyhole is below the curved metal handle. "I don't see anything dangerous," says the cleric. "But then, I don't know much about traps. You sometimes find on doors. It's worth a try." She tries to open it, but the door seems to be locked. "Could you try to force it open?" she asks. You back up a bit, and with a short run, you slam into the door. But try as you might, you can't break it open. "What a pity," murmurs Alina. "There is probably some nice treasure in there, but we can't get to it. We need a thief." Seeing the puzzled look on your face, she explains, "You might think that thieves are bad, but many of them aren't. Thieves are adventurers too. Some of them are quite nice folk, really. You do have to keep an eye on your coin purse, but a thief can be very helpful finding traps, opening locks, climbing walls, and doing other things. I'm sure we could do better if we had a thief along, and a magic user could help too. I usually go adventuring with those types, plus a couple of big fighters like you to handle the rough stuff. Unfortunately, nobody else wanted to come along this time." You try the door again, but it won't open. So with a sigh of regret, the two of you continue down the corridor. The corridor curves to the left, and you see a light ahead. You stop and listen, and hear voices. One sounds like a man, but the other sounds like a goblin. "Get up, you whimpering weakling," growls the man. "Who else did you see besides the fighter and the cleric?" "Please, master, don't hurt," whimpers the goblin. "Nobody else, nobody. I hurt the fighter real bad. I come to tell you right away." The goblin lies. Doesn't seem to fool the human. "Get up, I say, or I'll turn you into a toad. You probably ran away without even trying. Nobody else, you're sure?" "Nobody else, master, I swear." "Humph. They could still mean trouble. Perhaps we can trick them and kill them without a fight. Alina taps at your arm once again, and you back up to discuss the situation. I recognize that man's voice, she says. It's Bargle, one of those bad magic users. He has probably cast a spell on the goblin to force it to serve him. If we go back, we could be safe. We should be safe. Oh, I almost forgot. The ghouls are back there. If Bargle only has one goblin, we should risk this battle rather than face all those undead. Besides, he's not ready for us yet. Listening carefully, you hear the magic user and the goblin planning how to trick you and Alina. The two of you also make plans. The magic user is the most dangerous, and Alina will try to fight her spells with hers. Your job is to fight the goblin. As you return, you hear a spell being cast up ahead. You peek around the corridor. Around the corner and see a tall bearded human in a black robe standing in a room. A goblin is crouching by one wall, watching. The robed magic user is moving his hands and saying words you don't understand, and then suddenly disappears. The goblin crackles with glee and says, "Oh, master, it worked. Nobody can see you now." And what a surprise those nasty people will have. "And I'm next. Make me invisible too, master," the cleric whispers now, before he can do any more. And you charge into the room together. The goblin jumps up and meets your charge with a swing of its sword. It misses. The goblin has 2 hit points, and you still need to roll a 12 or better to hit. Roll the die and keep a track of the battle in the same way as you did with the snake. As you battle the goblin, Alina looks wildly around for the invisible magic user, waving her mask to and fro in the air. It seems to hit something, and you hear a deep grunt. She keeps waving her mace, but without further success. So she stops and casts a spell. You don't see what her spell does, so you concentrate on the fight. The goblin hits your fighter for 2 points of damage. You only do 1 point of damage when you hit, compared to the goblin's 2, but the goblin only has 2 hit points, so it's a fair fight. Roll again to see if you hit the goblin. If you miss, the goblin swings and misses again. Alina can't find Bargle and is starting to look worried. Suddenly, the sound of a spell comes from the far corner of the room. The cleric turns and runs in a direction, waving her mace and shouting. The black-robed magic user appears with the same corner as the spell noise, with a glowing arrow floating in the air, shoots out and hits her. She wails and falls with a sigh, collapsing in the middle of the room. The glowing arrow disappears. If your fighter hasn't slain the goblin yet, roll again. While you are swinging, the goblin hits you again, causing 2 more points of damage. Remember to keep track of hit points for both the goblin and your fighter. If your hit points reach 0, the enemies win this battle. You will not see home again. If you are still fighting, the magic user stays back in the corner, thinking about what spell to throw next. Roll again. The goblin keeps on missing. The goblin started the battle with 2 hit points, so the second time you hit the creature, his hit points reach 0, and he shrieks and falls dead on the floor. You have overcome 1 enemy, but the magic user remains. When the goblin falls, the magic user starts looking worried. Watching you carefully, he starts saying magic words and waving his hand. He's casting his spell at you. You run at him, hoping for a chance to swing before he can complete the spell. But it is too late. The magic force touches your mind. Roll the dice once. You must make a saving throw against the spell. If you roll a 16 or less, the magic takes effect. You read next section ending number 1. If you rolled a 17 or higher, your fighter avoids the spell. Skip to ending number 2, page 8. So I'm going to roll, actually. So here I go. I am rolling, and I rolled a 10. So I'm going to go to ending number 1. Ending number 1. You miss the saving throw. As you get near the magic user, a funny feeling comes over you. While he doesn't look so bad, in fact, Bargle seems to be a pretty nice guy. You think you used to be friends, but you are not just quite sure. Feeling better? He asks. You are overcome with rage for a moment. Are you okay now? Sure, you reply. Somewhat confused. You seem to be okay, Bargle, old pal, and I only took a little damage from the goblin. Say, I saw some ghouls back there. We should get moving. Indeed, replies Bargle. Well, let's pack up the goodies and move on. Together you collect a treasure, a small bag from the goblin, a larger one from the cleric. Bargle picks up a black velvet bag, explaining that he dropped it while he was fighting the goblin. As you get ready to leave, you blurt out, shouldn't we take the cleric's body back? She helped me out there earlier. That would be nice, Bargle replies, but we're carrying all we can. We all take our risks here in the dungeon. Something seems wrong about that. You argue with Bargle a bit, but he convinces you that nothing could be done for her, and you bring her along could slow you down, and maybe enough that the ghouls would catch up. So you head off down the corridor as if the best of friends. The corridor leads to another room, which is empty. You search it together. Nothing can be found, but looking down the next passage, you see light. Bargle, you explain. Look here. I see, he says. That must be a way out. We're in good shape now. Lead on, fierce fighter. I shall watch for the ghouls. You head down the corridor towards the light. Sure enough, it's a side passage leading out on the small hill onto the sunlight. As your stomach grumbles, you remember that it's afternoon. You missed lunch in all the excitement. Shall we head back? You ask, as you squint out into the daylight, much brighter than your lantern. Surely, he replies. As you head outside, you start to talk about how hungry you are. Bargle's reply isn't in a language you can understand. You stop and turn and see him softly chanting a spell, waving his hand at you. Before you can ask what's going on, you begin to feel very sleepy. Everything goes black. Something lands on your face. You start to wake up. Opening your eyes, you see a leaf apparently fallen from a tree above you. You are lying by a cave, and it's late afternoon. You can make it back to town if you hurry, but suddenly you remember what happened. Bargle, the fight with the goblin, Alina falling, the strange, bad, but nice feeling about the magic user, horrors. You were enchanted. And where is this treasure? You get up quickly, brushing the leaves off your face and equipment. Perhaps Bargle was afraid to kill you and just stole what he could find. Or more likely, Bargle was scared away by something before he could slit your throat. Your dagger is missing, and some of the food, but your sword is in its sheath, and your pack is still there. One sack remains, the other, and from the pain in your back, you must have been sleeping on it. It contains some of the coins you found by the snake and the tiny gem. The rest is missing. You remember what happened to poor Alina. You should take her back to town. They might be able to help. And even if it's too late, she should get a proper burial. As you prepare to return to the caves, you find... lost my spot. You find that your lamp has gone out. The oil just burned away. There is still one oil flask in your pack, so you refill the lantern and light it with your tinderbox, and you head back into the thing. So I'm going to cut to the end here. All right. So the fighter goes back and grabs a hold of Alina's body. He is chased out by the ghouls, and he manages to get back to the town. Alina is dead. All right. So now this is a scenario if you saved your saving throw, but let's get to where it says winning here. You have just played a D&D game. This adventure was designed to show you some of the basic parts of the game. You played a fighter who tried to survive in a dungeon while finding monsters and treasures. Succeeded, so your character wins. The point is, and a really, really important thing in here, is that Alina was killed. And this is such an important thing to set in the mind of a new player, is that character death. And Alina could have very easily had been a player character, one controlled by a player. Player death is a reality. And to have it in the, to have this in the instruction here is, I'm going to switch views. To have it in the instruction here is truly a masterpiece. It really does set the tone, over and over again throughout the story. It's doing two things simultaneously. It is explaining game rules as they occur, and then at the same time, it is explaining what role-playing is like and what, or should be, and what the dangers of adventuring are. And it does this almost interchangeably. So you're going back and forth. You're seeing that not all combat situations should be engaged with, right? You saw that with the ghouls the first time around. And then she said, it's a very good thing that we don't encounter them again, because I might not get so lucky again and be able to turn them. And we're no match for that. Earlier on, it warned just the fighter before he had met with Alina that he was already injured by the snake. So encountering another snake like that might be a cause for him to backtrack and try to leave. Old school Dungeons and Dragons, and not just D&D basics rules here. Old school Dungeons and Dragons always made the players learn to be cautious. Because if you weren't, the systems were much deadlier than than modern day games in general. You didn't have as many feats and such and actions and everything in order to prevent death. If you had a few a few missed rolls, right? In any of these situations, his character would have most likely have been killed, right? It was meant to show the player, like, this is just a scenario. You're playing a solo game adventure here, and it was designed for that character not to die. But in most situations, I'm telling you, Bargle would have slit the person's throat and stolen all of their items and left. Um, so that wouldn't have been a normal outcome. But I mean, this is just a masterpiece. Again, it is. It is the best way, I think, of teaching a new player to the hobby what tabletop role playing is about, and it does it so deftly in just a few pages. I mean, there are so many different gems of takeaways that you can have coming from this. So so yeah, that's my stance. I'm going to call this a masterpiece in introducing new players to the tabletop RPG hobby, not just Dungeons and Dragons, but more specifically for Dungeons and Dragons, but for any other tabletop role playing game out there. Uh, this is a great thing to introduce your new players to. So if you can get your hands on this, I know you can get them for about like $20, $30 on eBay, both books. Then certainly do it. If you're going for the box and the box set and everything, you're probably pushing around 80 or 90 or maybe even higher than that at this point. You can go to Drive Through RPG and get copies of it as well, which I don't necessarily recommend you do. Uh, but um, but yeah, I mean, this is certainly something that you would want to introduce new players to. So I'm going to leave it at there. Thanks for joining, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks, Anthony, for giving me the inspiration to come up with this video and talk a little bit about this. I know this went longer, but I think it was really important to read that interaction to you so that you can really get a sense of what brilliance is captured in those 4 pages of reading. So you all have a great one. Take care.